You're listening to Ask the Advocate, a podcast series that features advocates for domestic violence, sexual violence, and all other survivors of abuse and serious crime. I'm your host, Billie Jo Weyant, and for the past 3 decades, I've worked in the victim services industry, serving as the executive director for a Pennsylvania-based nonprofit named CAPSI, which stands for Citizens Against Physical, Sexual, and Emotional Abuse. I invite you to join me as I sit down with my guests each episode to discuss critical victim service resources and to help raise awareness for the most pressing challenges facing survivors and the nonprofit agencies that serve them. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Ask the Advocate. I'm Billie Jo Weyant, your host. I have over 30 years of experience in working with victims of abuse and survivors. And today I have with me a very special guest from the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence, Michelle Cooper. I want to let you also know that PCADV, as we lovingly call it, has been a leader in as a coalition and the very first coalition of the nation. And so we are the oldest of all time and still going strong and doing wonderful, wonderful work, not only in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but also across the nation with other coalitions. And Michelle, before I go any further, I do want to let everyone know who is watching and or listening to this episode, we are really going to be talking about different forms of abuse today and abusive behaviors and how those behaviors sometimes don't come off as what people necessarily think that abusers of domestic violence should behave like, and also how victims should behave. And there's no set way in which a victim is to behave. A person in that situation survives, and that's what they do, and they are in fear. So I think today's episode is really going to really get into that a little bit more. And we're going to talk about how lethal an abuser can be, and hopefully give a survivor who may be listening or watching this some hope and also some other option for them to reach out in their own area and see what they may be able to do to get more assistance. So, Michelle, I'd love to turn it over to you. I want everyone to know your vast experience and what you're doing, not only with PCADV, but also what you've done in the past to lead you here.
Awesome. Thank you, Billie Jo. So I'm Michelle Cooper. I'm the Technical Assistance and Education Manager at PCADV. I've been there since 2018, and I have the privilege of really providing and helping the team at PCADV who provides training, technical assistance, and resources to all of the member programs across the Commonwealth. Before that, I worked at one of our member programs as a human trafficking and medical advocate. So I have direct service experience. I've had an opportunity to really, work in the field for a long time. And that's why I'm so excited to be able to talk about this topic today, which is really looking at the situation with Kim Kardashian, Kanye West, and Pete Davidson, and how that very, very, front page news situation caught our attention at PCADV because of the dynamics that we saw unfolding. So we, saw this, when it first started last month, and really started thinking about, well, we got to write an article about this. And as you and I talked about in preparation for this podcast, everything sort of keeps going. So when we first started the blog article, that was before the music video came out. Then we're like, all right, we're going to amend the article so we can include that information. And of course, since we published it, now, things just sort of keep happening, which is really, identical, I think, to what we experience as advocates in a situation where, a survivor starts to really be in need of our help and support services. So I'm really excited to be on here to sort of talk a little bit about the article, talk a little bit about, why we wanted to sort of put it out there in the way that we did, and definitely to really highlight, that this is a situation that clearly can happen to anyone. And obviously the help and support that's out there for folks.
Absolutely, Michelle. And Also, I think when you and I were in our preparation phase before, talking a little bit before we decided on exactly what topics we were going to be talking about, how this just doesn't affect the two individuals closely related,
Right.
or the two, the partners, for instance, in this situation. This affects everybody. I mean, if you think about this, this is literally going international,
Mhm.
and it's affecting everyone. And now my concern is, as a local advocate and running a local program, but looking at things on a bigger level, and now with social media and the access people have, my big concern is, and I always say this, I sometimes feel as though we go back 30 years, and all the work that we've strived to do, many times I'm so concerned that it's going to go back to the way it was.
Sure. Yeah. I think that whenever we see a situation like this play out, it's, we sort of think, man, how
Yeah.
have we made progress at all? But I feel like, being able to have these conversations and to look at how folks are responding to the situation, we're now
Mm-hmm.
starting to see more people really identifying this for what it is. So while I think we all sort of share that disappointment when we see a situation, especially one so highly publicized.
Yes.
And I think that was one of the things that we really wanted to highlight in the article was, listen, Kim Kardashian, Kanye West, Pete Davidson, they're celebrities. They have a ton of resources and, social media presence
Yes.
that places them in a different kind of category. However, whether we need to be concerned about their safety or not, and of course, I think everyone who's an advocate is. The thing that we wanted to really talk about in the blog article was, even if you're not concerned for them, let's think about the folks who are watching this play out.
Yes.
And the folks, like you said, on social media who are taking sides, who are looking at this and saying,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm gonna look at what Kanye is saying, and now I'm getting really angry. And, if I ever see Pete Davidson, I'm gonna do something to show my support. Survivors, folks who are experiencing
Right.
abusive behavior and watching a woman, a couple with all of those resources, still unable to disconnect from a past partner. Those things are really scary. And I think, those are the things that I wanted to make sure we were able to write something to have this podcast to say. We realize it can seem discouraging,
Mm-hmm.
but there are those local resources available. There are still those supports available so that folks don't have to feel like, man, if Kim Kardashian can't get out of an unhealthy relationship, how might I ever be able to do that? And to hopefully, like you said, offer some hope and support for folks who are watching this
Right.
play out, going, man, if they can't do it, I got no chance.
Definitely. And I think too, as you were speaking, I was reflecting a little more on what we had spoken about, where there were some people commenting, and I did read this, and I can't remember offhand. It was something on Twitter or something like that. But one of the things that they were discussing was, how wonderful that Kanye was able now to buy a home right next door to Kim.
Right.
And isn't that great for the children? Not understanding that is a form of power and control.
Absolutely.
And that's his subtle way
Mm-hmm.
of maintaining control and also letting her know that she better watch her step. And it's scary, very scary.
Absolutely. And, we sort of addressed this in the article as well, as saying, this is similar behavior to, the partner who, hangs out outside of someone's work or
Right.
knows somebody's schedule. So, I know that they're going to take the kids to, to soccer, and then they have these errands that they're going to run. So I'm just going to make sure that anywhere they are, I'm there. Not many people have the kind of resources to buy a whole home, but Kanye, yay, does. And so, I think you absolutely made a great point that some people look at that and they're like, oh, he's doing such a great thing for the children. And sure, if they had an amicable relationship and had talked about it first, then that's great. But in this
Yeah,
situation, at least as far as we've been able to see from Kim's response and from Kanye's escalation, it wasn't something that they talked about first. And definitely is a demonstration of the more privilege, the more power you have, the more access you're able to gain to a past partner who may not be interested in having that kind of close connection and may actually be getting more and more terrified.
exactly. And that leads me to another piece. If anyone is following, and I'm sure there are many that are following this,
Right.
but when you say that, because I've also researched, read up on uh, Kim's response, and I don't, and none of us, please, none of us want to, we're not picking on anyone. We're just using this because it's such an out there example
Yeah.
of cycles of violence, of how abuse can occur, escalate, and become lethal, unfortunately. It's dangerous.
Sure.
But even when you have Kim stating that it's not so bad, that
Mm-hmm.
minimizing effect,
Mm-hmm.
it's not so bad. He's a good father, but that is very, very common, folks, for someone who's afraid. And we totally understand that and deal with it every single day, because that person will do anything and everything to appease the situation so that there's not an explosion that occurs. And victim survivors become very, very keen on the triggers of the abuser. Very keen.
Mm-hmm.
They know exactly when it's coming. I mean, I've talked to hundreds of survivors myself over the many years that I've done this. And again, it is playing out as exactly as what we see every day.
Yeah, and I think that when you have a situation like this one, just
Yeah,
as one example of people who have a very public facing persona. You see
yeah,
people wanting to protect that. And we've seen this in other high profile cases of domestic violence as well, where somebody really I don't want to ruin their reputation. I don't
right,
want to ruin their livelihood, their career. I just want to be out of this relationship. I just want
right.
this behavior to stop. And so I think we've seen that sort of play out in this situation where up until very recently, Kim has been very respectful, has been very, I'm not interested in bringing this out into public. This is a private
Exactly.
divorce. This is a private situation.
Hmm.
And I think one of the examples, that really stood out to us is as soon as she started seeing someone publicly, that's when we saw a lot of this behavior really start to escalate and really
Right.
start to to become that front page news situation where now Kanye is making these threats and talking, coming
Hmm.
up with a disrespectful nickname for this new partner. And obviously at the time of the blog article, that's when the music video came out, which depicted some pretty, extreme violence against
Yeah.
Pete Davidson. And, we've seen the response that, oh, it's just my artistic expression. I should be allowed to express myself this way. And that's the same sort of behavior, that minimizing behavior, oh, I wouldn't actually do anything. But in our article we reference, in Pennsylvania, 12% of domestic violence fatalities
Yes.
in 2020 were, included that third party individual. And most of the time that third party individual, it could be a friend, it could be another family member, but we know that, you know frequently that's somebody that is either a new partner or is perceived as a new partner. So this is absolutely part of that pattern, where now
Oh,
he's
yeah.
he's picking on, he's singling out this new
Yeah.
partner. And
Yeah.
we see that escalation happening. That's when the house got purchased. That's when all of these things really started happening and ramping up.
Another thing that I noticed, now again, even since we did the prep call on this and kind of researching things and reading through, is I noticed right away, and it's something that over the years that I'm become very concerned, is when the children start to get thrown. I don't want to say thrown into the mix. Bad choice of words. I am sorry about that. I apologize. But when these kids are brought into,
Yeah.
and they could, and it's being done kind of on a subliminal, unless you're really understanding what's going on, it's
Right.
hard for folks who are not working the way we do every day in this, with this type of work. But it's like now referencing the children and how he's going to be the stellar father.
Mm-hmm.
He's setting things up so that the stage will be set, so that unfortunately, if things don't continue to go his way, he's going to unfortunately ramp things up and make it really, I'm hoping not, but possibly make her look like she's the bad mom. And I
That's
mean,
certainly, yeah, that's certainly a tactic that seems to have been playing out. And I feel like it's significant because that's really when we've seen her starting to push back more directly. Is, you know,
yes,
I think at some point over the last couple of weeks, he was saying things about, oh, this is what happens now, I never get to see my kids. And she sort of just put a very, you know, very straightforward, you were just here this morning to pick the kids up, please don't keep, you know, promoting this narrative. And I think that that was a really defining aspect of this, at least from my perspective, because that's when we really sort of saw the pushback begin. And you know, I think you're right. When we see the kids start to be used as that, you know, whether they're used for gaslighting, whether they're used to try and get the public opinion on one person's side or another, I think since that, you know, just one little statement from her, we've seen a lot more folks sort of starting to see this for what it is and call it out a little bit more, which is really what we had said at the end of our article is, you know, are Kim and Ye and Pete Davidson going to be okay? Probably. You know, hopefully, hopefully we won't see an escalation, and hopefully, I think that those of us in the advocacy world, you know, are not. I know for me personally, I'm not as concerned necessarily, you know, that a celebrity is going to, you know, actually perpetrate some kind of bodily harm on another celebrity. Now, if that happens, that wouldn't, you know, nothing's shocking in our world anymore. But I think our main concern, especially when we were writing this article, is what about fans? What about people who are watching this and seeing this and thinking, oh, I really want to get someone's attention. I really want to show that I'm supportive of Ye, or I'm supportive of this. You know, he's already asked his fan base previously to, you know, if you see the two of them out, shout out, you know, Kim Ye forever, you know, do all of these things. When you start to, you know, when you start to get folks sort of whipped up into that kind of, you know, oh, if I do this, maybe I'll get a celebrity's attention. That's what concerns me.
Me too. I agree with you. Absolutely.
But, you know, at the end of our article, we really start to point out that no matter what, we want folks to think about how this situation is impacting survivors and folks who are experiencing abuse, who are, you know, going through similar things, who are feeling that sense of discouragement. And what can we do, right? You know, instead of sort of getting lost in the social media world, what can we actually do when a situation like this you know, starts to come out? And we had talked about, you know, over the weekend, Trevor Noah had you know, a response to this situation that was identical to what we had been talking about. And he really, you know, called this not even out. He really took the time to call Ye in to say, hey, you know, please don't act this way. You know, we're here to help you. How can we support you?
Exactly.
Having been through, you know, a cycle like this himself, you know, Trevor Noah really took the time to make this personal in a way that I think spoke to survivors in exactly the way that we were suggesting folks might do in their own individual lives. And if folks have an opportunity to check out that clip, I think it's a really, he says it way better than I could.
And I was just going to say that, and it is on YouTube and it's available. And yeah, I was just going to say that about that. Michelle, one thing I'd like to back up on just a little bit is the fact that I want to be sure that anyone who is listening and doesn't understand exactly what gaslighting is in our world. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because I know when I speak about it through CAPC or anything in my world, a lot of times I do get people that say, can you please explain that to me? I need better clarification.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny. That's one of the things that I had to Google when I first started doing advocacy work, because when you hear gaslight, it makes you think of a certain thing. But actually, the term gaslighting comes from a play called The Gaslight. And so what the play focuses on is, and I'm going to get, there's going to be theater people listening to this that are like, she didn't get the plot right. And I apologize to all of you. But the general idea of the play is that there is an abusive partner who is trying to make his wife feel like she's losing her mind. And so he would turn the gaslight down just a little. And if she would say, "Oh, doesn't it seem like it's dark in here?" No. Is your eyes okay? Everything's fine. So it's that intentional tactic of discrediting another person, making them feel like, doing things intentionally and then saying, "No, I never did that." And we see this, it's such a subtle and significant tactic where we see folks who clearly do a thing. And then when they get called out on it, they say, "What? I never did that." So I think that when we talk about gaslighting, there's all of those ways that we are just having behaviors that discredit a survivor, that make them feel like they're, just not reporting their own experience or emotions accurately. And really it makes, if you talk to anybody who's experienced this, and I think it's such a foundational tactic in most, unhealthy and abusive relationships, you hear people say, "I feel like I'm losing my mind. I know that I said this, and I know that I said it in the nicest way possible. But when I said it, they came back to me and said, 'Oh, why do you have to yell at me that way all the time? Why do you have to treat me this way all the time?'" These are just basic examples, but it really impacts an individual to think, did I say it in a weird way? Did I get that? Did I have an experience personally and then get it that wrong? It really messes with your mind, your self-confidence, your ability to feel like you have the authority and agency to stand up against an abusive partner. So that is my 20-second description of gaslighting. There's probably way better definitions out there, but that's how I like to describe it when folks ask me that question.
And if I could just quickly add to that, and again, I keep going back to all the years that I've worked directly with survivors. I mean, it can even be, I've had cases where individuals have gone to work or left the home, came back, and potted plants were moved on the porch, and different things inside the house were moved when this person supposedly had locks changed. And it really is emotionally abusive to this person. It just drains people. And like you said, folks think they're going crazy. They literally think, did I say this? This couldn't be. I must have forgotten to put something away. It's really a severe form of abuse. But
Yeah.
thank you. That was a wonderful explanation on
Well,
that.
thank you so much. And we see this, at least to some degree, even with the response to his music video that was very violent and really
Yes.
upset a lot of people, where
Mm-hmm.
folks said, "Hey, I think you took it too far. Oh, you're just being sensitive. Oh, this is just how we are in the art community. This is just a expression." And it really
Yeah.
diminishes. At the end of the day, it diminishes somebody's emotional response to something by saying, "Nope, your emotion is incorrect. Let me tell you what you should actually be thinking or feeling." And it's devastating. And so I think when we have a high profile situation like this, to watch that sort of play out, and not just the gaslighting of partners, but of the viewing public too, of being like, well, I was pretty upset by that. Should I not be upset by that now? So I also think it's important for us to name these things, because most of the time I think folks get an idea that, like, oh, if I'm not experiencing a physical aspect of abuse, I'm not going to be eligible or supported in any kind of services. And I think if
Right.
there's one thing that this situation helps us highlight, unfortunately, is that there's so many tactics of power and control, and that don't involve ever, putting a finger on someone. And so, for anyone listening, like, if you're looking at this situation saying, I'm not sure if this is abuse, or I'm not sure, I'm going through the same thing, I don't know if I would be eligible for services, absolutely, support services are available for anyone experiencing that kind of abusive situation. And I think the emotional, kind of coercive control
Yes.
are things that, if it's one thing that we can do in our small corner of the world with this podcast, is to really reassure and validate folks that are experiencing that, to say,
Mm-hmm.
these services are 100% available to you.
They're 100% available. We are non-judgmental. Everything's very confidential. Now, I'm talking across the nation. I'm not just speaking about our organization.
Right.
People that are hot, they're trained, care, and I can only speak for the programs throughout Pennsylvania, but I'm guessing this would hold true in many other states and commonwealths,
Mhm.
that our services are all free of charge, no matter what your income level is. We want to
Absolutely.
help. That's why we're so grateful for the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence and you, Michelle Cooper, because again, being leaders and providing the needed funding for us and the support every day. All we need to do is reach out, and you folks are available. But yes, no one needs to suffer alone. Everything we do is confidential. We have safety plans in place for folks. So we're always here 24/7 for anyone who needs help. Real quick before we wrap things up, sometimes I did tell you that I was going to share with folks just our little stats for last
Mhm.
year. So for the 2021 year, and our year runs July 1 to June 30, CAPSI provided services to 334 new people. And that was adults, children, and their significant others. And in Cameron County, Little Cameron County, 29 new people. That doesn't even account for all the ongoing folks that we work with every single day. So all of us taking part really are able to make a difference. And I certainly hope that our podcast today has really enlightened some people and given some people hope. And I wish nothing but the best for Kim, her family, and I certainly hope Kanye gets the help that he needs.
Mhm.
And we'll just keep doing what we do every single day. And Michelle, I'd love some final words from you. And
Sure.
sure.
Absolutely. Well, I think the one thing that I wanted to point out is, as I mentioned, we saw, Trevor Noah have a beautiful response to what's going on. And already we've seen a shift in perspective. And
Yes.
so what I think I'd like to sort of close out with is just for folks to really know that it doesn't take a lot to provide help and support for survivors that can change that trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
And just being able to call something what it is, to be able, to say, hey, I don't like what I'm seeing, I don't like this, I'm going to speak out about it. It makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference in public perspective when you're a celebrity. And it makes a huge perspective, or a huge perspective change for individuals. And so, whoever is listening to this, we're not all celebrities here, of course, but being able to, to speak out, to call things for what they are, and to always validate the experiences of survivors, it really does make a huge difference. So, for folks who are listening that may be experiencing things like this, there's support available to you. And it doesn't always have to look like shelter, right? We have case management, we have safety planning, we have legal services, all sorts of supports for folks who may need a little extra help. For folks who are not experiencing abuse, but are really seeing this and are worried, know that your concern and your voice matters. And you can make a difference just in the same way that Trevor Noah did. The tides will shift when we are able to speak out about things and support survivors. That's the best thing that we can do. And that's something that all of us can do.
I have nothing better to even add to that. That was perfect. Thank you, Michelle. I'm so happy, and I hope you come back. I'm really excited. This was wonderful. I'd love to.
I just love having the chance to hang out with you, Billie Jo. So I'll do this as many times as you want me to, because this is so much fun.
Well, and like I said, I'm not kidding when I say how long PCADV has supported CAPC and many other organizations across Pennsylvania, but also being a national leader. And the very first, we always say PCADV is the grandmother of all statewide coalitions. And again, the support is phenomenal. We appreciate everything. And I'm so glad that you were on this episode of Ask the Advocate with me. And I want everyone to know that, you'll be back and we'll have another great episode. And so for now, Michelle, I will bid you adieu. And for all of you, I'm Billie Jo Weyant. Thank you for being a part of our Ask the Advocate podcast. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Ask the Advocate. If you have a topic suggestion or would like to be a guest on the podcast, you can contact me directly at asktheadvocatepodcast@gmail.com.